Hello friends, welcome to part 2 of helping our children develop their superpowers. So today's discussion is going to be on a few ways you can work with your children to help them develop their future power, their superpower for the future. So I have many of these ideas I could give you, but I have a short amount of time, so I'm only going to list a few today. So we want to also remember from 2 videos ago when I set this entire series up about how most of my library is designed for future generations, because this generation is already so pre-programmed, they're not going to really be able to make the shifts in large numbers. Of course, if you're here and you're my age or my son's age, you're capable of making the shift, but the large amount of this information is geared towards future generations who will comprehend this, because this library is designed to affect the evolution of consciousness on this planet. So consciousness is going to be radically transformed in the generations to come as to what it is and what it's all about. And this library is designed as the beginning of this evolutionary revolution in consciousness. So I want to speak about our children, because we have to start setting them up and educating them and preparing them for all the things that are coming in the future. There's going to be in the future some collapsing, you might say, of institutions. And the power in some sectors is going to be put back in the hands of we the people. And where one of these collapses in institutions is going to occur is in the education system. There's going to be in the future a more positive momentum towards a grassroots education system. And I mentioned this in part 1 video. I mentioned start teaching, homeschooling, and then get together with groups. Well, there is actually going to be a larger movement of this education outside of any institution. It's going to be a grassroots movement where not only can we as adults, we want to pick up new education, we want to pick up new skills, and we go and do it online or with a group that's got the mastery of how to do that skill, and we maybe take an online course or we go and travel somewhere. We're going to be working outside of the educational system, the institutionalized system. This is a movement coming in the future. So today, let's talk about some of the things you can start doing right now. So I have a small list. There's plenty more, but this is the list for today. The first place I want to start is you can start your children very young in learning how to focus their mind and their intuition. And so I'm sure some of you have seen those in university studies where they take a blank card. Let me see if I got a blank card. Like this. And on the other side of the blank card is a symbol that looks like this. And here you are looking at this blank card, and the researcher puts it up and says, what is this? Is this a square or circle, a cross, a triangle? And you're supposed to use your ESP and decide what it is. But with children, you can still use, these are just stationary cards. You can get these cards and you can put these kind of symbols on it. And if these are too sophisticated for early children, put something up there on each card put something on there that they might understand, like a drawing of their favorite toy that's a simple drawing, not too complicated, something that they can relate to, or draw a dog, or draw, their favorite fruit, or possibly something that looks like water. But it has to be very simple, and it has to, not too complicated, but it has to be simple enough for them to recognize it as part of their daily life. But when they get a little older, you can do this. And so now I would try and do this, several times a week, where you sit down with them and you take the card out and you say, okay, and you make up one of these and give it to your child so they can look at the paper. Because in the beginning, children are learning to focus their mind and their intuition together. So if you hold up just a card in front of them, their mind, because they don't see anything on the card, their mind will wander, and you're telling them, you've already shown them this, okay, there's either a square, circle, or triangle up here, which one is it? Their mind can wander and they can struggle with that idea of staring at a blank card. But if you give them a page that shows what the 4 objects are, and you hold up the blank card, keep it up there, then you can say, what is this? And now put that thought in your mind. It's a circle. And hold the thought circle, because now the children are going to work on what their superpower is. Do they get a vision in their head, like suddenly they see a circle? Do they get a telepathic message sent from you that you're saying circle, and so they're picking it up telepathically? Are they picking it up through their divine blueprint, through a download of a circle vision in their head? Or can they look at this paper and look over the symbols? And what sometimes will happen is one of the symbols will sort of get brighter or sort of jump out at them. And this is another intuitive way to get the response. And so they'll look at the pictures and they may say, circle. So there's many ways. And now if they don't get anything right, and you do this little exercise and you do it over and over and again, they're not getting it right, that doesn't mean they don't have that superpower. It just means they have to first develop a connection between their focus, their intellectual focus, and their intuition. And how are they determining what that is? Are they using telepathy? Are they, maybe they hear the word circle in their head. Maybe they hear it from you. Are they using visions? Are they using an intuitive hit where something jumps out at them? So it can take a while, but if they get one right, that's great. We're just working with their skills. We're exercising that muscle. We're developing their ability to start linking their intuition, their inner knowing with their mind and focus. Okay, so the next one I want to talk to you about is a little sort of tarot deck, or they may make these, I don't know. They may make tarot decks for teenagers and children. I haven't really investigated it, but I have a tarot deck that I want to show you. This is the book, the little book that explains the different cards. And the reason I'm giving you this deck is because when I bought it, I was looking to find a way to connect more strongly with nature. And remember, in my spiritual gifts and talents, I have an entire video on connecting with nature. This is going to be very important, that our future generations are symbiotic with the planet they live on, whether it's going to be Earth, or when the Great Migration comes and they're all traveling to a new world. They have to have a skill of being symbiotic with what gave birth to their body, because these will be terrestrial-based beings. In other words, they have a home world. So when you have a home world as a multidimensional being, you are connected to that world. Even if you travel in ships to other places, you are still symbiotic with that world. That world is your mother. It nurtures you. And so we need to teach our children how to nurture the planet we're on, which is right here, Earth. So these cards have a lot of symbols where the king or the queen or the knight are actually animals, like a bear or a fox. And there are some symbols in these cards of like the ancient stones, like Stonehenge is used. Stones are used instead of pentacles. So we're not talking money, we're talking stones. And it's a different philosophy. We're not generating a money consciousness idea. We're generating what the essence of that whole idea might be. And there's a lot of sort of androgynous figures in it, where they may have a little bit of long hair, but they could be a boy, they could be a girl. And then there's some that are definitely male and some that are definitely female. But there are these images are more like Celtic, for example, or more of that old world, connected to the nature and connected to the earth sort of figures. So what I'm going to do now is I created a little video where I've laid out these cards and shot them so that you can sort of see a little collection of these cards for yourself. And I'm going to play that video now. So you lay out the deck in like a big on the table and make it, just throw all the cards out there and let them pick one. And whatever that card is, that's their friend for the day. And also I want to mention about this is don't necessarily read the meaning, because children will pick out what's important in the card for themselves. Now, this is using their intuition. And so if there's a card, like the one where a child is sitting by a cave, they may have a way to interpret that that's not quite what's in the book. And that's okay. When they get to be older and a little bit more, their mind is able to hold more complex thoughts, you can start letting them read the interpretations, or you can read the interpretations to them in the book. So moving on, the next thing I want us to focus on, which is going to be very important in the future, is growing gardens. And this is another future thing I'm going to tell you. Remember 2 videos ago when I set this up and I gave you several of my Smart Body higher consciousness travels to the future, and I saw that there was like water shortages, food shortages, collapsing of sort of, the electrical grid systems, things like that. We need to prepare our children to be able to grow their own food. This is a must right now to start teaching your children. So you want to start developing a garden outside in your yard. And you want to bring your children in there and you want to teach them how to garden. And if you do not have a yard, because this is going to be important, if we're going to, in the future, we're talking not 7, but 8 billion people, 9 billion people, you're going to need to grow gardens on your balcony or on your patio, or you're going to teach them how to attach like pots to the side of the wall outside and grow them out of pots. How to grow, and you need to teach them how to grow berries, like strawberries. If there's no place to put trellises up for blueberries and blackberries and things like that, strawberries can grow in a pot. So that's got a lot of good vitamins in it. So strawberries, and pick vegetables. If you have a big yard, you can grow anything, but pick vegetables and fruits that are going to be critical for survival, and start teaching your children how to garden these. And I bring up this book because this is a book called The Finhorn Garden. And when I was, this is a community in Europe on the coastline, the rocky coastlines up north, where absolutely nothing grows. It's a very, primitive, harsh coastline, just rocks. And years and years and years ago, this is a famous community. Years and years ago, people went up there and they created a very lush garden out of basically nothing. And people came from all over to figure out how they did it. Well, they worked with nature spirits, and this whole book talks about the nature spirits and how spirits, there are essence, you might say, or consciousness. Remember, I said a long time ago, everything has a divine blueprint. Animals, the plant kingdom, everything has a blueprint. It may not be as sophisticated as our blueprint, which is so multidimensional, we can rise up into very high levels of consciousness on our blueprint. But everything has a blueprint. Everything has consciousness. So this book is fun because it helps to teach the children about that there is a connection, there is invisible, and you can use fairies, but I use nature spirits. There are nature spirits that work with the garden, and we want to be honoring that idea. And we want to create, when I did one with some friends of mine in my house back in the 1980s when my son was much younger, there was a sacred space in the garden that nobody touched. It was for the nature spirits. Maybe like you would think in the old days, a fairy ring, only it's not that. It's just a place where the nature spirits have you. It's like an homage. It's like an offering to nature. Here is your wild, uncultivated spot in my garden. And that was always kept sacred. Nobody walked in it. No dogs trampled it. Kids didn't trample it. It was a sacred space. Teach your children about sacred spaces. Because the next thing I want to talk to you about is create a sacred space for your children and let them do it with you. Build a teepee outside in the backyard. Teepees are wonderful because now you're talking about Native Americans, you're talking about, you're building it. And so I would try a teepee if you're capable of, or some kind of fort. When I was a kid, I would go out in the wood. There was a wooded area in the bayou where we used to live on a bayou. And, I would take all this trees and all this underbrush and I would put it all together and make like a little fort, and I would hide in there. And we had a storage area out in our back of our house. We had some other buildings, and there were boxes stored up on the top of a shelf, and you had to climb up there with a ladder. I would climb up in that ladder and get behind those boxes and create a little fort. Children love to have their own sacred space. And if outside is not comfortable, even a tent, inside, designate a spot in the room that it's their sacred space. You don't go in there. You don't go in there. You don't touch their stuff. And if they're in there and it's dinner time, you might come in the door and say, it's dinner time. And if they say, I don't want to come, leave them alone if they're in their sacred space. Or offer to bring a plate to them and let them stay in that sacred space. Or if they're not ready to go to bed yet and they're in that sacred space, leave them alone. Even if they fall asleep in that sacred space, it's okay. When they're in this space, it's extremely important that they have somewhere in the house that they can go and they own that space. It's theirs. It's their private, secluded, protected space. No one else invades it. It's theirs. This is very important for feeling safe and for anchoring to their higher consciousness and their guides and their angelic guides. And this is a place where they really need this place of security, because they could have noisy brothers and sisters out there that are driving them crazy. The parents could be driving them crazy. School could be difficult. They just need this space. So give it to them. And when you set this space up, work out work out a deal with them that it needs to be kept clean. So ask them if they want to keep it clean, or ask them, can I have permission with you attending with me to go in and vacuum, or you can hand me the blankets or pillows or something, and I'll go wash them and I'll leave them in the room for you. Or if you give me permission, I'll vacuum for you. But Ask for permission and only enter it when they're there, so they feel they can trust you. Which is another issue I want to bring up quickly since I'm using the word trust. Don't lie to them about Christmas. I'm telling you, you may think it's wonderful to let your kids have a fantasy about Santa Claus every year, but I'm going to tell you what you're doing. You're setting up a pattern and a program of distrust and lies with your children. Stop it. Do not lie to them about where the presents are coming. Don't do it. Because it's our patterns that we teach our children to distrust us. And in the coming future generations, our children are going to have to be able to trust their parents, because the world is going to be chaotic and in just so much going down the wrong path. Remember the last video I talked about, in the last two videos, creating our own path now. We're creating a new path for the new generations. They're going to have to trust you, so don't lie to them. Tell them about Christmas. Tell them that it's a wonderful idea, that people like to pretend this or that. Tell them that it's the spirit of Santa. It's the meaning behind Santa, and we just use him as a figurehead, but what the meaning is about giving. Teach them a different way to understand Christmas. Don't lie to them about that stuff. And don't betray their trust. When you set a sacred space up for them, don't ever let them catch you invading it. You want to give them, you want to build trust with them. These are two ways to do it. Now here's one more thing, and I think I'll stop with this. You want to give your child a responsibility inside the family complex. This is not a chore, and they don't get paid. Those whole ideas that I grew up with and we did with our children are totally wrong. We don't want to teach our children that you get money for making up your bed, or you get money for taking out the trash. This is the wrong way to teach children. You're teaching children that the only value there is to do something for money. Wrong value system. What we have to teach our children is that inside a family nucleus, every single family member has a responsibility to take care of the family. The family unit is important. Everyone has a responsibility. And when you start them out young like this, there will be no question about it. It's taught to them that we all have a responsibility and we all have to do it. There's no, I'm not going to do it, what are you going to give me? It's part of our responsibility for being the privilege of having a family. So you can give your children the privilege of giving water and food to the dog or cat every day. You could give your child the job of going out and harvesting the fruit. Go pick the tomatoes in the morning, go pick the berries in the morning so we can have berries for breakfast. You know, they go pick the food out of the garden, they bring it back, they wash it off, and they set it on the counter, you know, on a towel or something to dry. That's part of their contribution. Any other way that you can see, maybe they, when they get a little older, they take the trash out. Maybe they vacuum the house. Give them responsibilities, and then everyone in the group, let them understand what everybody's responsibilities are. So they understand mom's doing this, dad's doing this, my sister's doing this, I'm doing this. We all have responsibilities. Teach them about being responsible to a group, to a unit, so that they have this idea of this is my home base, which is going to be important for the future, because we have too many children growing up completely without any kind of strong anchor system, and everybody is motivated to do something for money. And we have to get out from under this system of that system, because it's a wrong track for where we're trying to go in the future. We're trying to affect the evolution of consciousness, not just multidimensional consciousness, which is filled in my library, but just the day-to-day conscious awareness of my role on the planet, my role within my family unit, my role within my community. We need to reorganize how we're teaching our children. And so these are the things I'm bringing up today for us to consider. And I think that's all I'm going to cover today. So if you have any questions or any thoughts or insights or some added ideas you want to contribute, I'm welcome for you to post them below. I am considering doing a group of probably maybe brainstorming group where we can create more ideas. So I'll let you know more about that in the future. So thank you very much, friends, for being here.